Bayo Adelaja was born into wealth, privilege, and power. His father, Chief Omalicha Adelaja, was one of Abuja's most influential businessmen, controlling real estate, oil, and government contracts. From a young age, Bayo was groomed to inherit this vast empire. His life was a grand spectacle: lavish parties, private jets, and business meetings with dignitaries before he even turned 25. But privilege bred arrogance. Bayo believed himself invincible, untouchable, a prince who could never fall. He thrived in the high-class society of Abuja, making deals with the elite and basking in the comfort of a legacy built long before he was born. Yet, beneath the surface, whispers followed him. Whispers that he was too reckless, too ambitious, too willing to take risks that could burn everything down. One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the glittering lights of the city, his best friend, Daimeji, placed a business proposal in front of him. "Bayo, this is the opportunity of a lifetime," Daimeji said, eyes gleaming. "One bold move, and we'll triple our fortunes." Bayo barely glanced at the details. He trusted his gut more than anything else. "Let's do it," he said, sealing his fate with a single signature. The deal seemed flawless. An investment in an offshore oil venture with foreign backers, promising astronomical returns. Bayo convinced his father to fund a large portion of the project, betting that he would bring in more profits than any Adelaja ever had. But as the months passed, cracks began to form. The foreign investors vanished. The funds disappeared into offshore accounts that could not be traced. By the time Bayo realized he had been played, it was too late. The Adelaja Empire stood on the brink of financial ruin. His father's fury was unlike anything Bayo had ever witnessed. "You were blinded by greed. You destroyed everything I built," Chief Omalicha's voice thundered through their estate. When the banks came knocking, demanding repayments, and the government launched investigations into fraud allegations, Bayo understood the weight of his failure. The news broke. Adelaja Empire collapses overnight. Friends abandoned him. Investors sued. Enemies celebrated. And in the end, his own father cast him out. "You are no longer my son," Chief Omalicha whispered, his voice cold and final. Bayo, once the golden prince of Abuja, walked out of his father's mansion with nothing but the clothes on his back, knowing he had just lost everything. Bayo wandered through the streets of Abuja, his mind reeling. The very people who once toasted to his success now turned their backs. Even his closest friends refused to take his calls. Without a home, without money, and with no one left to turn to, he was forced to sleep in a cramped roadside shelter, surrounded by strangers who had no idea who he once was. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but his pride refused to let him beg. He spent the next few days roaming aimlessly, searching for a way out of his downfall. The whispers of his failure followed him like shadows. His name, once a symbol of power, had become a cautionary tale. "Did you hear? The Adelaja boy lost everything. He had it all and threw it away," a passerby muttered. Rage and humiliation burned within him. He needed to leave Abuja, disappear and start over. There was only one place that could swallow his past: Lagos. With the last bit of cash in his pocket, Bayo boarded a night bus to Lagos, the city where fortunes were made and lost every day. The journey was long, the bus packed with traders, laborers, and dreamers chasing hope. He stared out the window, watching the darkness swallow the last traces of his old life. When he arrived in Lagos, the city greeted him with chaos, blaring horns, bustling crowds, and an unforgiving pace. He had no plan, no contacts, just a burning desire to reclaim what he lost. Determined, he found a cheap, run-down hostel in Mushin, one of Lagos' roughest neighborhoods. It was a far cry from the luxury he once knew, but it was a start. He needed work, a way to survive. Swallowing his pride, he took to the streets, asking for any job that would keep him afloat. Days turned into weeks. He labored in a mechanic's workshop, his hands stained with grease, his back aching from long hours. But through it all, he observed, listened, and learned. Lagos was not just a city, It was a battlefield, and if he played his cards right, he could rise again. Then, one fateful evening, he met Baba Kareem, a streetwise old man with connections in the Lagos underworld. "You don't belong here, boy," Baba Kareem said, studying Bayo's face. "You're a prince pretending to be a pauper. But I see something in you, a hunger. I can teach you how to survive. If you're willing to listen." Bayo hesitated, but he knew one thing. He had nothing left to lose. Baba Kareem took Bayo under his wing, teaching him the unwritten rules of Lagos underbelly. "To survive here, you must be smart, fast, and always 2 steps ahead," he advised. He introduced Bayo to the street trade, negotiation tactics, spotting opportunities, and leveraging desperation for profit. Bayo started small, running errands and handling logistics for local merchants. He learned quickly, absorbing everything Baba Kareem taught him. With his natural charisma and business acumen, he began to outshine even the seasoned hustlers. Within months, he had built a network of connections, from street vendors to corrupt businessmen looking for discreet deals. One night, Bayo was summoned to a warehouse on the outskirts of Lagos. He had been gaining ground, making moves that threatened to outshine some of the bigger players in the underworld. Taiwo, the same businessman who once tested his reliability, now had a different tone. "Kindly subscribe and on the notification button. You're becoming too ambitious, Bayo," Taiwo muttered, circling him like a predator. "Ambition is good, but in Lagos, ambition without caution is suicide." Bayo remained composed. "I've only done what I was taught to survive." Taiwo smirked. "Then you should know. Sometimes survival means knowing when to walk away." The door creaked open, and several men stepped inside. Bayo realized then this was a warning, or worse, an execution. He had climbed too fast, and now the city's shadows were turning against him. Bayo had a choice: fight, flee, or outmaneuver the game before it swallowed him whole. Bayo sat in the dimly lit warehouse, his heartbeat steady but his mind racing. Taiwo's men circled him like hyenas eyeing a wounded prey. He had heard the Yoruba proverb before: one does not walk carelessly into the den of dogs. Yet, here he was, surrounded by men who had decided his fate before he even walked through the door. "I have no quarrel with you, Taiwo," Bayo said, keeping his voice calm. "You and I are businessmen, and Lagos is a marketplace big enough for all." Taiwo chuckled, his gold tooth flashing under the flickering warehouse bulb. "That is where you are wrong, Bayo. A town cannot have 2 kings. You should have known that before stepping into my domain." Baba Kareem's lessons echoed in Bayo's mind. The tortoise that falls into a pit does not waste time crying. It starts digging. He had to act, and fast. With calculated words and a firm gaze, Bayo turned the tables. He exposed Taiwo's vulnerabilities, unpaid debts, restless allies, and a looming government crackdown. By the time the night ended, Bayo had not only walked out alive, but had forced Taiwo into an uneasy alliance. The game had changed, and Bayo was no longer just another hustler. He was now a player. Lagos was like an open-air market, vibrant, chaotic, and full of whispers. Deals were made with a handshake, but trust was as rare as rain in Harmattan season. Bayo had learned this the hard way. With Taiwo watching his every move, he needed leverage. He turned to an old connection, Auntie Remy, a powerful woman who controlled the black market currency exchange in Balagan. She was feared and respected, known for her ruthlessness. "You have come back from the land of disgrace, Bayo," Auntie Remy said as she studied him. "A child whom his mother points at with her left hand will not last long." "I am not that child," Bayo replied smoothly. "I have come with an opportunity." Auntie Remy listened as he laid out his plan. Lagos was filled with politicians looking to hide their money and criminals seeking to clean theirs. Bayo would become the bridge between these 2 worlds. Auntie Remy nodded approvingly. "May your feet never stumble," she said. "But know this. The chicken that laughs at the dying fowl does not know its own time is near." Bayo had secured his first major deal. Now, he had to protect it. Bayo's success did not go unnoticed. While some whispered of his resilience, others saw him as a threat. Among them was Lanra, a former ally who had grown envious of Bayo's rise. One night, as Bayo stepped out of his car in Surleer, he felt it, a shadow moving too fast, a whisper of danger in the air. One does not ignore small rashes and treat full-blown leprosy. The gunshot rang through the street. Bayo's instincts kicked in as he dived behind his car, barely missing the bullet meant for his head. His men reacted swiftly, chasing the attacker down. Minutes later, Lanra was dragged before him, bruised and shaking. "You tried to kill me?" Bayo's voice was low, controlled. Lanra spat on the ground. "You took what should have been mine. This city belonged to me before you came with your empty hands and fake dreams." Bayo sighed, shaking his head. One does not point to their father's house with the left hand. Betrayal was the currency of the streets, but Lanra had underestimated him. Bayo let him go, but with a warning: leave Lagos tonight and never return. Lanra left, but the city had already swallowed his fate. Bayo's empire was growing, but power came at a price. He had money, influence, and connections, yet something lingered in his mind, the ghost of his past. One evening, as he sipped palm wine at a hidden lounge in Victoria Island, a familiar figure walked in. It was Daimeji, the very friend who had lured him into the deal that destroyed him in Abuja. Bayo's fingers tightened around his glass. When a mocker sleeps, one must keep their eyes on the road. Daimeji smiled cautiously. "Bayo, it has been a long time." "Not long enough," Bayo replied coldly. Daimeji sighed. "I did not come to fight. I came to tell you something. Your father is sick." The words hit Bayo harder than any bullet ever could. Bayo stood outside his family's mansion in Abuja, staring at the walls that once housed his golden life. Entering felt like stepping into a past he had buried, but blood called louder than pride. Inside, his father lay frail, his once powerful voice now reduced to a whisper. The man who had cast him out now looked at him with weary eyes. "You came?" Chief Olalikan murmured. Bayo swallowed hard. "You summoned me?" His father chuckled weakly. "Even the strongest tree must one day lean. The child who is not taught will sell the house built by his ancestors." They spoke for hours, father and son. Enemies turned into strangers. The illness had softened his father's heart, but the scars between them ran deep. As Bayo left that night, his father's last words lingered. "Your war is not over. Beware of those who smile too easily." Back in Lagos, Bayo knew one thing. He had come too far to lose now. If the past wanted to claim him, it would have to fight harder. The air in Lagos smelled of power and danger. Bayo had built his empire with blood and strategy, yet the crown on his head was invisible, respected, feared, but never fully secure. He sat in his office, overlooking the city skyline, as his trusted lieutenant Razak entered. "Oga," Razak began, "Taiwo is restless. He says you are growing too big, too fast." Bayo smirked, leaning back. If the rat inside does not betray, the one outside cannot harm. Taiwo was the least of his concerns. His real enemy was time. The coming elections meant politicians were shifting alliances. Some wanted Bayo's influence. Others wanted him gone. One, in particular, was Chief Adebanjo, a man whose handshake was never without a hidden blade. That night, Bayo met the chief in a private lounge in Ikoyi. "Young man, you have built quite a name for yourself," Chief Adebanjo said, sipping his expensive whiskey. "But the elephant that falls with its back." Bayo kept his face unreadable. "I am offering you protection," the chief continued. "Align with me, and I will make sure no politician or rival touches you." Bayo exhaled slowly. He knew what this was, an unspoken demand for loyalty. Accepting meant security, but also servitude. He took his drink and smiled. "Chief, I appreciate the offer, but Akuko Tiayu Jeoba, Ki Leke Irana. The rooster destined to be king does not fear sacrifices." The deal was refused, but the war had just begun. The rejection of Chief Adelaja's offer sent ripples across Lagos. The city's underworld whispered of impending trouble. Bayo, however, carried himself like a man untouched by fear. But fear has a way of knocking when least expected. A week later, as Bayo left a high-end club in Lekki, a black SUV blocked his car. Before his guards could react, masked gunmen opened fire. Bullets shattered glass. The scent of gunpowder filled the night. Bayo's instincts kicked in. He dived low, pulling his driver down with him. One of his men was hit, his body slumping lifelessly. The gunmen fled as quickly as they had come, leaving behind a message painted in blood. Leave Lagos or die. As Bayo stood over the body of his fallen guard, anger burned in his chest. Aki fi eat sile, pa lapalapa. One does not ignore a small rash only to treat full-blown leprosy. This was no longer business. This was war. Bayo knew he needed to strike first. His enemies were moving in the shadows, waiting for him to make a mistake. At a secluded warehouse in Apapa, he met with Auntie Remy and other key players in the Lagos underworld. The room was filled with heavy cigarette smoke and murmured conversations. This city is on the brink, Auntie Remy said, adjusting her geli. Chief Adelaja wants you gone. Taiwo is waiting to take your place. When fresh water becomes muddy, someone must pay. Bayo exhaled sharply. Then we move first. He laid out his plan, cut off Taiwo's money supply, expose Chief Adelaja's dealings with corrupt politicians, and form alliances with those who have been wronged by them. Razak nodded. But boss, Tiog Koba Dagba, if the banana tree is not matured, we do not say it is ripe. Are we ready? Bayo's eyes darkened. We have no choice. The storm had gathered. Now, it was time to let it rain.